This is a short talk that covers 30 years of experience, so I better get down to it. Now, hello California Extreme. Woo. Hello. This is my first time here. And this talk is about a career in game audio that I absolutely could not have imagined when I graduated from college in like 1972. The available pieces had not been invented yet. But I'm going to explain how some of it was done, and then I'm going to show you some of my favorite examples. So, for those of you who can't read it, sounds are vital to the success of any game. Therefore, great care must be taken to get just the right effect. There you go. Tim Skelly, that's one of the illustrations from his book. I mentioned him in the last talk. And Tim has a whole, it's like a Cliven kind of book with cartoons. And it covers that whole coin-op thing. And unfortunately, it got published right about the time when that whole coin-op thing just took a dive. And so there wasn't as much interest. And so I think he still has 1,000 copies. Okay, the Gottlieb soundboard. The problem is space. Okay, because let's get geeky. I want to talk about some of the DThiel on here. And the problem is storage. We had 4K of EEPROM, 4,000 bytes. That had to do everything. Now,
this is the amount of sound you get when you only have 4,000 bytes of memory.
Okay, that's a sample, which is stereo, CD, fidelity. That's what sound sounds like, you know, we're accustomed to.
This is the amount of sound.
If you, without compression, and you take the sample rate down to 6,000 hertz, that's the amount of sound you could represent on that EEPROM. So clearly, taking samples of all the things you want to hear in the game is not an option. What do? The ultimate compression is algorithmic sound. So I can take 40 bytes of 6502 code and loop it. As long as power is applied to that soundboard, I can make a simple sound wave forever, until the power runs out. That is the ultimate compression. Now, the trick is, if you want to do something other than a simple waveform, you have to figure out directly how to move the speaker. Because that's all you've got. You've got 256 positions that the speaker can be. You've got an 8-bit DAC, goes into an amplifier, and it moves, it applies power to a magnet, which moves this piston, which moves air. And it's that simple. So if you want to do something other than a simple waveform, you have to figure out the algorithm for that sound. So doing that is a little harder. That is the code that you're listening to. In 2004, I had a friend who was putting out a book because audio didn't have the same kind of love as graphics. And in graphics space, there was a book called Graphics Gems, where they had all these different guys contribute a chapter on Z order and stuff, right? But audio didn't have the corresponding thing. So my friend decided to make a book called Audio Anecdotes, and he tagged me. He said, well, you know something. So I wrote a chapter about 8-bit game audio. And as part of that exercise, I took the 6502 code and I converted it to C. And to my delight and surprise, once I took it down to the sample rate, it sounded exactly the same as the Qbert soundboard. Yes! It was like, what a robust algorithm. Okay, and you can't really see, I don't expect you to see it, but there are 6 clumps of hex bytes here. Each one of those is a reactor tune. And so the representation of the music is very concise, and it had to be because I had 4,000 bytes and I had a lot of other sounds I had to make. But the trick is, how do you make that nasty-ass guitar? Because I can't store that waveform, I have no space for that distorted guitar waveform. How do you do that? And I don't know how I arrived at this solution, because the way I did this, there's no, regular signal processing or regular traditional synthesis. You start out with a waveform, you use some kind of filter, you get rid of the things you don't want, you move it over time, you can make a lot cool sounds with just a noise source and cool filter. None of this can be done with a 6502 running at less than 1 megahertz. So how do you do this? Well, here, I'll give you the technique. Now, if you're really interested, you can still buy Audio Anecdotes off Amazon, and a disc comes with it. So not only the rock and roll code, but explosions and a couple other things. I give you the algorithms. And anybody who's got a $10 Arduino board can program these things if they can get the output to a DAC. And because probably you could run 20 instances of this code on a $5 board these days. So the trick in making the guitar is the waveform that I played is RAM. And I only had 128 bytes of RAM on the soundboard, which is half a stack for 6502 programmers. And so we have system variables up here, and then these are the variables that are running the algorithm, that are running the synthesis stuff. That's there. Then a bunch of my bytes are undefined. They're just set at whatever crap was in there since the last time somebody decided to write to them. And then my stack was at the other end, trying to stay out of the way. And I had to be very judicious about using subroutines, because with 128 bytes of memory, I could easily, any kind of recursion could waltz my stack right into all my variables, and that would be bad. Because the Mafia operated these games, and if sound stops working, I didn't want my knees to be threatened. So I had to make sure it was very robust code. So when this thing ran, it played whatever was in here using a wavetable algorithm. And the cool part is, some of these bytes in here are moving in a periodic nature because I'm driving a wavetable loop thing going around. So you get a pleasing kind of animation in all this nastiness, and it sounds coherent enough to sound like music, but nasty like a guitar. So now you know, for $10 and on an Arduino board, you could rock on all day. So let's jump forward a few years. This is a 30-minute talk. That's only 5 years later. And now I have a soundboard, and it's pretty much the same physical size as the other soundboard, but now I have a chip from Yamaha, which instances 8 simultaneous FM synthesizer algorithms in hardware. And if you don't know FM, it's a very interesting technique. It's not orthogonal. It doesn't make all sounds. Some sounds it makes really good, some sounds you can't make. So if it's your only source of sound, you've got to pick your moments, right? Do the things you can do well.
And stay out. Target wipeout.
So what we have here now is like 9 simultaneous sound generators. One of them decompresses waveform stuff for voice, and I don't use that as part of music very much. Then we have 8 sounds you can make. Usually I would reserve 5 of them to make music, and the other 3 were a pool that could be used to use in some combination to make sound effects. And Lonnie Robb is the guy who programmed this, and he did a terrific job on the light shows. The music is synchronized, the light shows are synchronized with the music in many, many cases. And that synchrony creates an effect which is bigger than the sum of both the light shows or the music. And at the end of this game, we were young and enthusiastic. And clearly you don't need to do this at the end of the game, but because we were young and stupid, we did it. did all that programming to do all that synchronization stuff. And that's the second appearance of my wife, who is doing the baby, you're the best. And here's the team that did this. We were a contractor to the pinball company, and each game we were contracted to provide the software package, all the light shows, all the game, the system, the operating, the sound, everything. And so the backglass for this game is a time before Photoshop. And with X-Acto knives and such, it was hard to put things together. And the guy who was the programmer kind of wanted to be a film mogul, more than he wanted to be a pinball designer. So he put together this thing where we drove in a bus, like a school bus, to Madison, Wisconsin from Melrose Park, Illinois, with a whole lot of people. We had people who did costumes and makeup. We had an ordnance guy who gave us guns without firing pins. We had all these people, camera people, lighting, some guy to take water and spray it on the ground to make the road look shiny. I mean, it was crazy. Because in Madison, Wisconsin, which is the capital of the state, they have a Capitol building which is a great deal like the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. So on the cheap in the Midwest, whenever you want to look like you're in D.C., you drive to Madison. So we drove up there at 5, we shot all night, and this guy, who was the actor, who was the pseudo James Bond kind of character, but he's not because we didn't have a license. That guy was really pissed. He's a union guy, and we kept him out all night. He was really angry, but that's Lonnie Ropp. He's the guy that did the light shows and all the game programming. This is Richard Ditton, and he wrote the operating system for the Data East first, I don't know, 10 or 20 games. That's his wife and co-founder of the company that we had. That's the baby, you're the best. That's my wife. And that's me. I have a gun. Pay attention. This is game number 3, called Torpedo Alley, and not a lot of them are sold, so you can get your hand on it. This was the funkiest submarine in the Navy. And you can see on the bridge we had these babes in spandex. Now, the thing you need to know in a time without Photoshop is when they shot this picture, the captain in the red jacket had the same pants. And it wasn't really butch enough. So they went back after the fact, the artist, and painted cuffs and this line down the side. It's kind of made it a little more macho. Now I want to admit up front that I get all this stuff from YouTube. There's a program called Keep It, which allows you to take YouTube streams and store them on your hard drive. Because I don't have these games, and I don't have access to all these games, but I like to share. So I get these things from YouTube. And they vary in quality, but this one is from, I think, some guy in the Netherlands. And you saw all that production and all those cool comments and stuff. And so to honor that, that's his logo. And his name on YouTube is Ballen Van Steel. So Time Machine was a cool game, and I think it was the best received of the ones that we did with Data East. And its feature is you move back in time from the 80s, 70s, 60s. When you get to the 50s, Time Machine has a real chime unit in it, just like an electromechanical game. So when you start scoring and stuff, you hear bells and things, real ones.
And a clacker.
And a clacker, yeah, for score reels. It's pretty cool. And of course we have Lonnie Ropp, who did the games and the lights programming. He ended up at Data East, which became Sega, which became Stern Pinball. He's still there.
Musashi and Taz.
Now, I did all that work because I was at Incredible Technologies, and we were contracting that out. And we made video games, primarily. And we became self-published. We'd been doing a lot of work for publishers, and we did lots of things. Capcom Bowling and Golden Tee Golf, you may have heard of that one. I did the sounds for the original. But we wanted a piece of that Street Fighter money. And actually Mortal Kombat was being developed at the same time we did this. Time Killers. And if you look out, I discovered on the web, when you look around, this is a very polarizing game. People will list it as the trashiest, awful fighting game there ever was. But I found people who also said, I don't know, man, it's like a B film, it's so bad it's good. So I found a very polarizing response to this game, and I sort of understand, because it had violence in it like nobody had ever seen. Mortal Kombat had that thing in the end where you ripped heads off and stuff. But throughout our matches, you could cut off arms and legs. And you had 5 buttons, right? So if you used the button for the right arm, but somebody had whacked it off, then blood spurted out of the stuff. And then you had to have code to wipe up the blood, because you couldn't have all that blood occupying sprites. So we had what I thought of as fluid technology going on. And it was a polarizing game. But, you know, at some point in the market, you start waving your arms in a big gesture trying to get a piece of it. And actually, we did okay. It was a kit game as opposed to those. And it made money for us, but it was a poor third to Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Well, the sound stuff I want to tell you about is all this time I've been in IT developing sound systems, it was starting to get pretty interactive. I was being able to do lots of interesting things that you couldn't do with MIDI or WAV files or anything. So this is an example. I made a demonstration of one feature of the interactive music. And here's a fight between 2 opponents. Okay, that's Mantaz, you're time killers, right? So you're traveling through time, you're fighting cavemen, you're fighting feudal lords, you're fighting different people from time. This is some creature from the future. Mantaz, he has his own music. And a note for the sound guys, this is no longer FM. I got to build a new soundboard, I got the chip from the Ensonics people when it was in their synth. So this is full wavetable synthesis from Ensonics, but not enough memory. So it could sound better, but it's certainly not FM. Okay, so there's another character that you're going to fight who is a feudal lord, kind of a ninja guy. Clearly not FM. Good. So the deal with the music in the background, which is interactive, which I want to point out because it's almost subtle, but it's useful, is the background music is not static, it's dynamic. And the way it works is you start the music of whoever world you're starting in. So in this mock battle, we're going to start in Mantaz's world, so it starts with his music. But then based on the strength bars, who's ever ahead, that's whose music you hear. And every time it changes, you switch to the other guys. So if you're paying attention at all, you can tell who's ahead without having to take your eyes off the fight and look up at the strength bar. And since some matches are timed, if you're way ahead and you've been ahead, it behooves you to stay the hell away from your opponent and just let the timer run out and you win the match. So it's a useful thing to the player to have this information coded into the music. The other thing that happens that I don't simulate very well is every time the music changes, because it's synthesized, I bump the pitch up. And I also bump the tempo up a little bit, but not as much as I would if I were just changing sample rates. And this just makes things more energetic and more tense. So in a battle, which has been going back and forth a lot, we may be up 4 or 5 semitones, and it's cranking. You know, and it's dynamic and in line with information that's useful to the player. And I mocked this up. I got rid of the sound effects and just kind of put the music in so you could actually hear the effect.
Time Killer, engage.
forward quick to some work. I left in 1993, I left IT and was hired by Microsoft Research to be in their user interface group to work on the non-game applications of interactive audio. I did that for 7 years, then I took some time off. And in 2006, I wanted to work again. So I got hired back by, well, it's who you know. I met this guy in when I left Gottlieb, we worked at a company that was doing console games. And Pat Lawler was there for a couple of years. I got to know him now. Who knows who Pat Lawler is? A few people. He's he's created the pinball games that have sold more pinball games than anybody else. So like Addams Family, Funhouse, Twilight Zone. So it's kind of who you know. I knew Pat pretty well, and I'm sort of back on the market in 2006. And Pat is now working for Stern. He's got a multi-game contract to make games for Stern. And Chris Granner, one of the legendary Williams sound guys, has retired, left a hole. So Pat said, well, let's get David. So I have a gig again. It's 2006.
All right, David. You wanted to know where the left orbit was. This is the left orbit. Here's the flippers, right? Here's the left orbit, and the left orbit goes up like this underneath underneath the exit of this back here. It goes like this, and then into the top popper here. This popper pops up and gives you to this upper playfield over here on the right. And then here's the ramp that leads to the plunder area. Here's the shot that destroys the ship, and then the ball will take you to...
Okay, which game is this? Pirates of the Caribbean, yes. And Dennis Nordham was the designer, and the hand you saw and the voice you heard, that's the programmer, Dwight Sullivan, who had worked with Williams as well. And frankly, this is an anomaly. I never got another video like this. It had been 17 years since I did Monday Night Football, the last pinball I did for Data East. So I have this huge black hole in my pinball list that includes all the glory years of pinball. But I'm back, okay? So then, this was the first one, and if you know Pirates of the Caribbean, it's not the simplest playfield. And so it took a little instruction.
Yo, how pirates lie for me.
Now, frequently I get that question, where's the Klaus Badelt? And people think it's Hans Zimmer, and there's some debate as that. I mean, for years it was just listed as somebody who worked for Hans Zimmer who did the score for this, and I thought he did a terrific job. But this was a Disney license, and music license can be arbitrarily expensive. They could give it away or cheap, like we got it for Indiana Jones. We got John Williams and the London Symphony Orchestra, and that's what you hear in main play. But with Disney, no dice. Very expensive, so I wrote all original music for this. I'm happy with it, but it thrust me into an orchestral position that was a bit of a stretch that I have now grown into, I think, over the last 9 years.
You take care of that extra ball.
You might want to clean off that ball now.
When you're done pretending, put money in.
Basically, you should look at my map is the main bullet point of this presentation.
Part 4 in our exclusive story, Man Fights Chicken.
Unleash the silver orbs.
So second game, is the Pat Lawler game, which got delayed. So I did Pirates first. But they got the Family Guy license. And that's Seth MacFarlane, obviously. And that's my favorite. I've done 17 modern pinballs, and that's my favorite call-out package. I mean, when you can hire Seth and go in with a 500-page or 500 line script, and in 90 minutes he knocks it out, 7 characters. He's a gone. So very cool, and that was great. And then we licensed the notion of the music. We didn't use anything. We couldn't use the recordings of the music. We licensed like sheet music of the music. And then I wrote about 7 bizarre permutations of the Family Guy theme at different times. And then I did this, which is one of my favorite things.
Who's gonna protect me from the evil monkey in my closet? All right, in my closet. Holy crap, no! I'm Chris. Hey, a Twinkie.
so that's Seth Green. Now, they were very liberal with us, allowing us to pull stuff from the shows and shows. I mean, I must have pulled clips from 60 Family Guy episodes. And I had an inventory of Crazy Chris stuff, but I wanted to do this. So I wrote this tune, and I'm evil, I'm singing that. And then I, did that mashup morphing thing and put Chris in. And it really sounds like he belongs there. I like that one. Okay, I got 2 things left. This may take me 5 minutes, is that okay? Okay, so I did a presentation before and I discovered that I had done more games for this designer than anybody else. So this is a montage of my favorite things. The next project was AC/DC, and well, they wrote the music. So this is the only licensed piece of music in Star Trek. I got to write the rest of it, but that's the Alexander, what I call the 10 notes, right? And you gotta have that. And so to show you some distance between Reactor and what I can render now, this is my rendition of my orchestra, or at least the one I paid for. Okay, we're running out of time, so we're now going to end up with the sing-along and the Klingon. Is everybody ready? Wake up, it's time. Okay, the concept, everything starts with the concept, so I really, what do you do for Klingon multi-ball? My notion was that the night before the battle, the Klingons are in a bar, knocking down Romulan ale, and they sing songs, threatening songs, songs they're practicing to take their people and get them on their knee. And the fundamental word in the songs they're singing is surrender. Now, YouTube makes things easier. So I found this sample from a 1996 PC game called Star Trek Klingon, published by Simon & Schuster. And it's Robert O'Reilly as Gowron doing what I need.
Bijech bech cho.
Bijech bech cho. This is important. There will be a quiz. So let's do it again. That's what it looks like. Bijech bech cho. And then technically it means if you don't surrender. but for our purposes, it's just he's standing over you with one of those nasty Klingon things saying, surrender, be jack, bech, cho. Okay.
Bijech, bech, choo.
So everybody, let's do this once, just because you're gonna sing it, okay? I'll talk it. So here we go. Be, jack, you've had your milk products. Beck, Shaw. Oh, you're gonna make dandy Klingons. So then I had to teach my choir how to sing Klingon. And so. Okay, this is it. We're gonna do it. You can hear the tempo's kind of fast and it's a little syncopated, so you know, you won't get 100% on the first try, but let's do it. You'll hear the music and then I'll guide you through it. Here we go. Louder. I'm not sure you're going to get your enemies on their knees with that one, but I'm out of time, so I'm done. And there won't be any questions because I've really stepped over the other guy's time, I think. So thank you very much.